I didn't realize my land was shrinking until I tried to install a fence. It started with wooden stakes, 4 of them, neatly placed along what I had surveyed, was my property line. Only they weren't on my property. They were 3 feet inside it. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Construction crews get sloppy. Landscapers eyeball things. It happens. Then I noticed something else. Bright orange spray paint along the grass. A faint curved line stretching from the edge of my driveway toward the back tree. Not straight. Curved. Conveniently curved around the rear corner of my lot. Toward the HOA president's mansion. Her house sat on the highest elevation in the neighborhood. A modern, glass-heavy estate that looked like it belonged in a real estate commercial. Rumor was it appraised at just under $10 million after the last market surge. She loved reminding people of that. I walked the line twice. Measured from the utility box marker. Checked against the original plat map I received at closing. 3 feet. Across nearly 120 feet of boundary. That wasn't landscaping drift. That was land. And not insignificant land either. 3 feet wide across that stretch equaled roughly 360 square feet. Prime corner footage. The kind that makes a backyard feel expansive. Or exclusive. The next morning, I found her in the neighborhood park, walking briskly, phone pressed to her ear. I waited until she hung up. "Morning," I said. She smiled politely. "Morning." I noticed some stakes placed along our shared boundary. Her smile didn't change. "Yes, we're updating the landscaping and perimeter design." 3 feet onto my property. That's when the smile thinned. "Oh," she said lightly, "there's been some clarification about the property line. The original developer's grading caused confusion." Clarification. Interesting word. "I have a survey," I replied. "So do we," she said. The confidence in her tone wasn't accidental. She wasn't guessing. She believed she had leverage. "Well," I said calmly, "I'd love to compare them." She adjusted her sunglasses. "Our survey aligns with the HOA's updated boundary review." Updated. I blinked. "Since when does the HOA redraw property lines?" "We don't redraw," she said smoothly. "We correct discrepancies." Now that was fascinating. Because HOAs regulate paint colors. They regulate mailbox height. They do not regulate county-recorded deeds. "Send me the documentation," I said. She nodded once. "I'll have it forwarded." By that afternoon, I received an email from the HOA's legal liaison. Attached was a revised boundary sketch. Not a stamped county survey. A community alignment adjustment. Signed internally. No municipal seal. No surveyor's certification number. Just HOA letterhead. They weren't stealing land with bulldozers. They were attempting to redefine it administratively. Quietly. Confident most homeowners wouldn't question a board president. Especially one who hosted wine nights and charity galas. Especially one whose mansion backed directly against the adjusted boundary. I pulled out my closing folder. Original survey. Stamped. Certified. Filed with the county recorder. Then, I did something she likely didn't expect. I ordered a new survey. Not a quick one. A full boundary confirmation with GPS mapping and certified corner pin verification. If she wanted paperwork, I'd give her paperwork. Because here's what most people misunderstand about land. It doesn't move. But paperwork can. And she was betting I wouldn't notice the difference. She was wrong. 3 feet might not sound like much. But to someone building a $10 million estate expansion, it's everything. And if she thought I was going to quietly surrender square footage because she held a board title, she was about to learn something very expensive about property law. This wasn't a neighborly misunderstanding. It was a test. And she had just chosen the wrong neighbor. The new survey took 10 days. 10 very deliberate, very quiet days. In the meantime, the orange spray paint remained. So did the stakes. And then something else appeared. A row of decorative stone markers. Not construction grade. Not temporary. Permanent. She wasn't clarifying. She was advancing. I emailed the HOA legal liaison. Subject: Request for county-stamped boundary verification.
Short.
Professional. Please provide the certified survey filed with the county recorder supporting this adjustment. The response came the next morning. The board's boundary alignment reflects internal review and developer documentation. Internal review. Developer documentation. Notice what was missing? County. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the county recorder's office. Pulled my deed.
Pulled the subdivision plat.
Pulled every recorded survey filed since development began. Nothing had changed. No amendments. No boundary corrections. No lot line modifications. Legally, my property was exactly where it had always been. 3 days later, the survey crew arrived. Tripods. GPS units. Metal detectors for corner pins. They worked methodically along the shared boundary. By mid-afternoon, the lead surveyor approached me. "You expecting a dispute?" he asked. "Possibly." He nodded toward the stakes. "Those aren't aligned with your recorded corners." "How far off?" I asked. "Just under 3 feet at the widest point." Exactly what I'd measured. He handed me a preliminary reading. "Once we finalize, it'll be stamped and certified." That was the word I needed. Certified. The following Saturday, a landscaping truck arrived to her property. Workers began digging shallow trenches along the orange curve. That's when I walked over. "Before you pour anything," I said calmly, "you might want to pause." The foreman hesitated. "The HOA approved this." "County hasn't." He looked uncomfortable. "Talk to her," he said, gesturing toward the mansion. She stepped outside moments later, sunglasses on, posture rigid. "This needs to stop," I said evenly. "Our survey confirms the boundary." "So does mine," I replied. "And mine is county-stamped." Silence. For just a second. "You're obstructing a board-approved improvement," she said. "No," I corrected gently. "I'm preventing encroachment." The word landed heavier than she expected. Encroachment triggers legal consequences. Not HOA hearings. Real ones. She crossed her arms. "You're escalating this unnecessarily." I didn't move the line. That's when she made the mistake. "Fine," she said sharply. "If you want to challenge the board, we can pursue enforcement for noncompliance." Noncompliance with what? I asked. "With community boundary alignment." There it was again. Alignment. As if property lines were decorative trim. I smiled slightly. "Please send that enforcement notice in writing." Her expression flickered. Just briefly. Because the moment something goes into writing, it stops being intimidation. It becomes evidence. That afternoon, I received a formal HOA notice. Failure to comply with revised boundary alignment may result in fines.
Revised.
By whom?
Not the county.
Not a licensed surveyor of record. The HOA. I forwarded the notice to my attorney.
Yes.
Attorney. Because land disputes don't get handled in clubhouse meetings. They get handled with filings. 2 days later, my certified survey arrived. Stamped.
Signed.
Corner pins verified. Exact measurements listed. 3 feet. Across 118.6 feet of shared boundary. Total encroachment attempt, 355.8 square feet. Prime land. The next step wasn't a neighborhood argument. It was a formal demand letter. Sent certified mail. To the HOA. And directly to her residence. It stated clearly, any attempt to alter, improve, construct upon, or represent ownership of the disputed area would constitute trespass and encroachment, and would trigger legal action. No yelling. No emotion. Just law. That's when the tone changed. Because she thought this was a social dispute. A board power flex. She hadn't anticipated escalation outside the HOA ecosystem. But here's what she still didn't realize. The land she was trying to absorb wasn't just square footage. It controlled something much bigger. Access. And once you understand access, you understand leverage. And she was about to learn exactly how much leverage 3 feet can hold. The demand letter worked. For about 48 hours. The landscaping crew disappeared. The orange paint faded under a light rain. The stone markers were quietly removed. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just retreat. Then the retaliation began. It started small. A routine compliance review, notice taped to my mailbox. Alleged violations. Trash bin visible from street, it wasn't. Shrub height exceeding guideline by 2 inches. Unapproved boundary obstruction, referencing the survey stakes.
Petty.
Predictable. Transparent. When power gets challenged, it often lashes out sideways. I responded to each violation in writing. Photos attached.
Timestamped.
Measurements included. No sarcasm. No emotion. Just documentation. The fines began, anyway. $150. Then $300. Then daily penalties threatened if non-compliance persists. That's when I requested a formal hearing. In person. Recorded. The HOA board sat at the front of the clubhouse. 5 members. Including her. She looked composed. Controlled. Like someone used to presiding over outcomes. I brought a folder. Not thick. Just precise. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't argue about shrubs. I didn't argue about trash bins. I projected one image onto the screen. The certified county survey. Stamped.
Signed.
Highlighted boundary. Then I overlaid their community alignment adjustment. 3-foot shift.
Clear as daylight.
Can the board provide a county-recorded document authorizing this boundary modification? I asked calmly. Silence. I turned another page. County plat map. Highlighted. Unchanged. Then I placed the final document on the table. A title report. Because here's what she hadn't considered. My property wasn't just adjacent to hers. It bordered the only secondary access easement to her rear service drive. An easement that technically crossed a narrow strip of my lot. A strip that the HOA's alignment conveniently attempted to absorb. If she succeeded in shifting the boundary, she'd gain uninterrupted private access. If she failed, that access remained legally dependent on my land. And easements require maintenance agreements. Permission. Defined usage. Leverage. I have no intention of blocking lawful access, I said evenly. But any future representation of ownership over my parcel will result in revocation of informal access accommodations. That landed. Because up until now, I'd allowed contractor vehicles to cut across that rear corner without formal paperwork. Neighborly courtesy. If I formalized the easement terms, she'd lose convenience and possibly resale flexibility. One board member shifted uncomfortably. Another asked quietly, is the alignment officially recorded anywhere? The HOA's legal liaison cleared his throat. Not with the county. There it was. Not recorded. Meaning not real. At least not legally. The hearing ended abruptly. The fines were under review. Within a week, I received written confirmation. All violation notices withdrawn. Boundary enforcement rescinded. Community alignment language removed from pending updates. Quiet.
Contained.
But the dynamic had changed. Because now the board understood something she hadn't calculated. This wasn't about 3 feet. It was about exposure. If an HOA attempts to administratively redefine deeded property without county authority, that's not aesthetic enforcement. That's liability. And liability makes insurers nervous. Very nervous. I could have stopped there. Let it fade. But she didn't. 2 weeks later, a contractor truck attempted to access her rear drive again, across my corner. This time, I stepped outside. Access requires a written easement agreement going forward, I said calmly. The driver froze. Called her. She stormed over. You're being unreasonable. No, I replied. I'm being precise. You never had an issue before. I never had a boundary dispute before. Silence. Because here's the truth. When someone tries to take land quietly and fails, they don't just lose territory. They lose trust. And trust changes how neighbors interact. 3 feet hadn't cost her land, but it was about to cost her convenience. And in luxury properties, convenience affects value, especially when we're talking 8-figure estates. She tried to redraw my property. Now I was about to redraw her expectations. Legally. On paper. And in a way she couldn't administratively align away. The easement paperwork changed everything. Up until that moment, access across the rear corner of my lot had been informal, neighborly, unwritten. Contractors drove across it. Landscapers used it. Delivery trucks occasionally cut through it to avoid backing down her long, curved driveway. I'd never cared. Until she tried to take the land beneath it. So I had my attorney draft something simple. A formal, recorded easement agreement. Defined width. Defined usage. Defined liability. Defined maintenance responsibility. And most importantly, compensation. Because access across private land isn't free. Not when it benefits a $10 million estate. The proposal wasn't outrageous. Annual usage fee. Insurance rider naming me as additionally insured. Maintenance cost sharing for wear on that section of ground. Standard terms. Professional. Legal. When she received it, she called immediately. "This is absurd," she snapped. "No," I replied calmly. "It's structured. You're trying to profit off this." "I'm protecting my property." Silence. Because protection is hard to argue against, especially after you've tried to redraw someone's boundary. She refused to sign. So I installed something simple. A removable gate. Not blocking the full width of the easement. Just clearly marking. Private property. Access by written agreement only. Legally, I was within my rights. The easement was implied by historic usage, not formally recorded, which meant I could regulate it until terms were established. The impact was immediate. Large contractor trucks could no longer take the easy turn. They had to back down her long front drive. Delivery vehicles required coordination. Landscaping crews adjusted schedules. Minor inconveniences. But in luxury property management, minor inefficiencies ripple. Within a month, I heard from a local realtor, one who specialized in high-end estates. Word travels fast in those circles. Apparently, she'd floated the idea of listing the mansion. Not officially. Just exploratory conversations. And during a preliminary review, the access question came up. Rear service drive? Shared access. Unformalized. Potentially contested. Realtors hate potentially contested. Buyers hate it even more, especially at 8-figure price points. Because sophisticated buyers don't want handshake agreements. They want clean title reports, clear easements, zero neighbor disputes. The irony was almost poetic. Her attempt to quietly absorb 3 feet of land had triggered documentation that now followed her property legally. Boundary dispute history. Recorded correspondence. Formal access negotiation. Nothing defamatory. Just factual. And facts linger. She requested a meeting. Private. No board members. No attorneys. Just us. She looked tired. Less polished. "Let's resolve this," she said. "We can," I replied. She exhaled slowly. "What do you want?" "Not money. Not revenge.
Control. Clarity.
Recorded easement terms. Proper compensation. Formal acknowledgement of boundary accuracy. And a signed statement confirming no future claim against my parcel." She stared at the document. "You're leveraging this." "Yes," I said evenly. "Because you tried to leverage it first." That was the moment it shifted. Not hostile, not dramatic, just transactional. 2 weeks later, the easement agreement was signed. Recorded with the county. Annual compensation wired. Insurance updated. Gate removed. Access restored.
Clean.
Structured. Legal. And here's the part she likely didn't anticipate. Once recorded, easements run with the land. Meaning if she sells, the agreement stays. Her property now carries a permanent recorded dependency on mine. She tried to expand her estate by 3 feet. Instead, she formalized its reliance on my parcel. That doesn't reduce a mansion to nothing. But it changes perception. At the $10 million level, perception matters. She didn't lose her house. But she lost unilateral control over how it functions. And in luxury real estate,
Control is value.
3 feet. That's all she wanted. 3 feet that would have quietly increased her backyard symmetry. Instead, she ended up negotiating annual access rights to the very land she tried to absorb. And we weren't finished yet. Because power struggles don't end when paperwork is signed. They end when lessons are learned. And I wasn't convinced she'd learned hers. Not yet. The neighborhood eventually went quiet. No more violation notices. No more alignment updates. No more orange spray paint creeping across grass.
From the outside, it looked resolved.
But the real shift wasn't visible from the street. It was recorded at the county. The easement agreement now sat permanently attached to both of our properties. Defined access. Defined compensation. Defined liability.
Clean.
Legal. Unavoidable. 6 months later, a luxury real estate listing quietly appeared. Her mansion. Drone photos. Cinematic twilight shots. Private rear service access. Careful wording. Very careful. During due diligence, buyers asked the obvious question. Is the rear access fully private? The answer?
No.
It runs with a recorded easement, controlled by the adjacent parcel.
Mine.
Now, an easement doesn't destroy a $10 million property, but it changes negotiating leverage. Because high-end buyers don't just purchase square footage.
They purchase autonomy.
And autonomy that depends on a neighbor's land requires explanation. One offer reportedly fell through during review. Another came in lower than expected. Coincidence? Maybe. But disclosure matters. Eventually, the property sold. Not for the original aspirational number. Still substantial. Still impressive. But not untouchable. The new owners introduced themselves within weeks. Professional. Polite. They had already reviewed the easement terms. They understood the structure. And they appreciated that everything was documented. No hostility. No ambiguity. Just clarity. Which is how it should have been from the beginning. As for the former HOA president, she stepped down before listing the house, citing personal priorities. Board leadership shifted. Governance became quieter, more procedural, less experimental. Because here's the truth. She never actually stole my land, but she tried to treat it as flexible. And land isn't flexible. Paperwork can be. HOA policies can be. Egos definitely can be. Deeds are not. She wanted 3 feet. Instead, she formalized permanent dependency on the very property she attempted to absorb. She didn't lose her mansion, but she lost leverage. And in high-value real estate, leverage is everything. People assume these disputes are about revenge. They're not. They're about boundaries. Physical ones, legal ones, and personal ones. She tried to redraw mine. So I redrew the rules. Not emotionally. Not publicly. Just legally. 3 feet. That's all it was. But sometimes 3 feet is the difference between ownership and overreach.